Hi, everybody. I'll give you a moment to connect to sound. Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1242nd New Social Environment. I'm Chloe Stagaman, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the extreme pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Jodi Hauptman and Amanda Gluibizzi. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce today's guest and host. Jodi Hauptman is the Richard Roth Senior Curator in the Department of Drawings and Prints at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Her most recent exhibition, Hilma of Klint, What Stands Behind the Flowers, is currently on view at MoMA and is the subject of today's New Social Environment conversation. Hauptman has lectured widely on modern and contemporary art and has contributed essays to exhibition catalogues, edited volumes, and scholarly journals. And our host today, former associate professor at Ohio State University, Amanda Gluibizzi, is the founding co-director of the new Foundation for Art History and an ArtSeen editor for the Brooklyn Rail. She specializes in mid and late 20th century art, design, and urbanism in the United States, Europe, and Latin America. Amanda is the author of Art and Design in 1960s New York from Anthem Press. And now it is my great pleasure to pass it over to Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back for the fall season. And thank you so much to Chloe and the Rail team for inviting me and Jodi to have this conversation today about Hilma af Klint's floral work, let's say. I just want to start off by saying that this exhibition has really upended the way that I have thought about Hilma af Klint. I am not a particularly spiritual person. And so when I saw the Guggenheim show of her work, I chose to see that as abstraction. That was just my aesthetic preference. This show, however, makes it very clear that even well into her artistic career, she is thinking not only about spiritual concerns, which we already knew, but also about the natural world. A lot of the work that's in this exhibition is surprisingly late, which is something that I hadn't really consciously processed when I saw the Guggenheim show. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. As a result, as I was going through it, I really started thinking of her as an abstractionist, yes, but perhaps not necessarily as a non-objective artist. And perhaps Jodi will have a different point of view, or perhaps you will have a different point of view about that. And so I started thinking about her more as almost like a medieval illuminator, someone who is working with the natural world, who is working with text, who is working with image, who is working with diagram, all in a spiritual mode. So for me now, she's kind of more of like a Hildegard von Bingen than she is like a Frank Stella or a Donald Judd. So my questions are going to kind of come at it from my own personal response to this exhibition, as Jodi well knows. And so if you find that you're disagreeing with me, that is a-okay with me. And we encourage you to contact Chloe and Magli so that you can get your questions in the queue so that you can ask Jodi some questions at the end. Okay. So we'll get going. Again, Jodi, thank you so much for being here and congratulations on such a gorgeous show. It is truly a delight to be in the exhibition.
Thank you, and thank you, Amanda, and the whole Brooklyn Rail team. It's just such wonderful people, and it's great to be with all of you and this amazing audience today.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask you first how this installation differs for you from other exhibitions of Hilma af Klint's work, and how did you envision our looking and comprehending of this artist?
Well, it is a very different project than the other exhibitions that many of you might have seen that have really kind of exploded across the globe in the last decade or so. And in our own city here in New York, of course, the most amazing exhibition at the Guggenheim in 2019. And those shows, I think, their mandate was to put af Klint on the map, to bring her into the story of the beginnings of abstraction in the early 20th century. And Chloe is kindly showing some installation images and examples of her most well-known work, the 10 largest, which is part of a group of paintings called the Paintings for the Temple that she made between 1906 and 1915. And as many of you on this call know, of Klint began, kind of set out, embarked on that journey in 1906 as a result of messages she received from her spirit guides. And so those exhibitions, many of them have been these kind of expansive, a kind of retrospective of the whole body of work, and really making a case for her singular kind of abstraction. And then following those, there were a number of exhibitions that that kind of took a topic and again really trying to put her into the story. So there was an exhibition at Tate Modern on of Klint and Mondrian, and then there was an exhibition in Dusseldorf on of Klint and Kandinsky. And so beginning to think about her as not an isolated figure working in Scandinavia on her own, but perhaps not in actual dialogue with those artists, but conceptually in dialogue with those artists. And so yes, our exhibition, it takes a different route, and is possible because it really builds on the amazing work in all of these other really big expansive shows. We look at a very precise 5 years, 1917 to 1922, and the focus of our exhibition is a portfolio of 46 drawings that are known, have this title, not hers, but have given title The Nature Studies. And those drawings, which combine observation, close observation of nature with envisioning. And this is something, Amanda, you alluded to right from the start. And so this is her method, Klint's method, is really on the intertwining of those two strategies or methods. And so it focuses on that this particular body of work in a very kind of razor focused way. So it's an intimate show, and there's a particular through line.
So many of the works here are works on paper, which is also an unusual thing for a Hilma af Klint show, at least as we've learned to know them, because we're so used to seeing these gigantic canvases. And so I was curious about that. As, of course, a curator of works on paper, but also as a viewer yourself, what did working with all these works on paper tell you about her process, or about her preferences, or about the way that she decided to see?
Yeah, there's, the paintings for the temple, there's 193 of them. So it's an enormous, ambitious project. And there is some paper in those, and even some of the 10 largest are paper on, mounted on canvas, but it's paper really used in, I would say, in the service of painting, and there's the kind of a gesture and expansiveness, whereas the nature studies that are the subject of our exhibition, the 46 drawings, are watercolors on paper, smaller scale. They're 19.5 inches tall, and they have a kind of precision that is very different from the paintings that you know about the artist. So I think, like, when you enter the galleries and you begin to see that kind of close looking and that precision, it seems like on paper that was a very different approach for her, including using drafting tools, compasses, etc. And I can't help but call out the amazing drawing that Chloe put on the screen now. This drawing of a mushroom, which is not part of the portfolio that is the featured portfolio of the exhibition, but was an extraordinary discovery of Klint's work on paper as part of our research. And so I hope it's okay if I just tell that that story, Amanda,
I
and
think we
because
would love
it's just so incredible. So because one of the things that we were trying to get at in the exhibition was of Klint's interest in nature, and we knew from the scholarship already out there that she did have this interest, but our exhibition and the particular drawings in MoMA's collection show that this was a formative and an intense engagement. And so as we were trying to figure out how she got there, how did she end up, setting out to make these drawings of flowers? We knew that she was already trained as a landscape artist. And so she made these very sensitive watercolors and oil paintings of landscapes. But we also discovered that she actually worked as a scientific illustrator in the realm of botany. And it came this kind of amazing way. We were having conversations with the curators at the Swedish Museum of Natural History in Stockholm, and one of our key partners on this project is a botanist, Lena Struve, who teaches at Rutgers, and she kind of pushed them to do some investigating in their archives, and they went in and into a set of papers that hadn't really been looked at in many decades, and was mostly uncatalogued, and they went in and they found 7 drawings of mushrooms. And in the papers of this renowned mushroom specialist, renowned Swedish mushroom specialist, M.A. Lindblad, and you can see on this drawing that's on the screen now that it says on the drawing directed by M.A. Lindblad and drawn by Hilma of Klint, and it gets right to that kind of partnership between artists and scientists, where the scientists would have collected these specimens and passed them on to the artist. And the hope was that these drawings would eventually find their way into a book. But for us, and here's a second one, and you really feel like the close looking that Af Klint is doing, the texture, the gills in the mushrooms, those of us who cook with them, know how the tops of mushrooms, the caps feel, could really sense that in these drawings. And it was a kind of like smoking gun for us, because it showed that she was not only interested in nature, but she actually worked professionally in that realm.
That is so interesting. One of the things that's mentioned in the catalog is that unlike certain botanical illustrators, Hilma af Klint is often willing to reproduce the surrounding forest or the surrounding ground cover around the specimen that she's working with. So here we're seeing ferns, and we're seeing, of course, this is more of a landscape painting, right? But Chloe, if we look at, for example, image 33 or image 52, we can see, for example, that these, I'm going to call them dandelions. I don't know if they're dandelions or not, but we can see that they are actually planted in the ground, which is apparently something that is unusual in botanical illustration. I was fascinated by this because, of course, this makes me think immediately of something like Albrecht Dürer's great piece of turf. And so I was kind of curious about this to ask you. Obviously, we know she's interested in botany and in her role as a professional illustrator, amateur botanist, but is she also, do you feel, looking to art historical precedent in the way that she's representing these plants?
Yeah, I think she definitely knows the conventions of botanical illustration, and that was again why the finding those mushroom drawings was so crucial. And also in her regular practice, she was trained as a landscape painter, and so she shows a real sensitivity to the natural world. I think that watercolor of ferns that we had up a moment ago is just such a great example, because the color is so brilliant. And then she goes back in with blue ink and defines almost each frond of each fern. So there's a real sensitivity to the detail of of nature, those details, and this kind of in this beautiful one where how light falls on a tree. You know, she's very attuned to the natural world. But at the same time, she's making even as she's doing work, this more famous abstract work, she's always, we believe, doing these more representational drawings, including botanical drawings. I think there was I don't know if we put it up, there's an image of a thistle so more conventional botanical illustration, which is usually on a white background with no with as you described, you don't get the earth around it, you don't get the setting because it's a specimen. We're trying to understand the details of that object. And so and in our exhibition we include some examples of the most well-known Swedish botanical atlases of her day, which she surely would have known. So yeah, I think there's a couple of things to point out, and maybe we could, I don't know if we have the maybe the bindweed image. It doesn't matter. We can go back to the one you had before, the Tussilago farfara, which is which had I think it was like 33 that Amanda asked for. Yeah. So this middle one that looks like a dandelion, but is the Tussilago farfara, which I've learned is very recognizable because it's a very early plant of Swedish spring. It really calls out that the spring is about to appear. And so you can see that the kind of setting. And so one of the things, and so we should just say on the screen, this is an example of one of the 46 drawings in this portfolio. And in the spring and summer of 1919 and the spring and summer of 1920, Klint goes out into her environment. She's living on an island outside of Stockholm, in an area she knew well because she spent summers there as a child, and she's drawing flowers every day. And so sometimes sometimes she draws flowers, as we can see here in the middle, and she gives us some of the setting, and probably drawn on site. And sometimes, as is true of the one in the upper right, where you see the root system, she would have pulled it out, and so maybe she would have taken it home to finish it. There are flowering plants, flowering trees also that she would have also drawn on site because it would have been too hard to take a branch home. And so you get the sense, even by the composition and the inclusion of that of what's around the plant, that that sense of what her process would have been. But there are other ways that she departs from convention, the conventions of botanical drawing, because botanical drawing often is we get an idealized version of the plant, whether it's the kind of perfection of a particular aspect, a leaf or a petal. And Klint is drawing actual plants, and working with the botanist really helped with this, because she could really help us understand that there were real plants, not idealized plants. And also Klint is always focused here on the flower, never the fruit. So it's about and the flowers for her, and I think for all of us, are about beginnings and new growth, and the kind of the beginning of the cycle of the season, so that and often in a botanical atlas image of something, you might get flower and fruit at the same time, which is impossible because they don't happen at the same time. But those images are trying to share something about the whole cycle of the plant, and so she doesn't do that.
And so in the catalog, it's explained to us that she starts by going out when the first flowers start appearing. And so then this notebook continues then through the blooming cycle. when we look at a single sheet, like the sheet that we're looking at right now, are we to understand that these flowers are all in bloom at the same time? And if that's the case, are they happening, are all of these images happening on a single day, or is she using a sheet over and over again until she feels like she's represented, I don't know, May 15th or something like that?
Yeah, so she starts the project in late April 1919, and the first plant is the hepatica, which is the first plant of spring. And she poetically writes that the hepatica has been doing its work underneath the ground, the cold ground, and it's got to fight its way through that kind of frozenness, and it finally, breaks through and opens its sheath to the sun. And it is a very beautiful idea about beginnings. And so she goes out into nature almost every day and is drawing usually a single flowering plant. And each plant, you can see there's some writing here. Each one is labeled with its scientific name in Latin, its common name in Swedish, the date it's observed, and then it has this diagram, which we can talk about separately. That's a whole other topic. And so yes, so what's one thing that also departs from botanical convention, instead of organizing plants around certain species or families, the her portfolio of drawings, which she had envisioned that it would be a book eventually, was organized by chronology, by the blooming season. And so in this case, each what is common on the sheet, each of those plants, is that they were blooming at relatively the same moment, let's say across a particular week or a few days. And the other thing also to point out is that these flowers are and we learned this from the botanist, that are common plants. They are weeds. They were plants that she would have easily found right outside her door in the fields and forests nearby. She didn't have to go look for them. Wouldn't have taken much to find them. And there's only a few cultivated plants like the tulip or a marigold. And so there's something very, very beautiful about this idea of raising up something that's common, and by focusing her razor sharp eye on it, and drawing our attention to it too. But across the portfolio, you can see the rhythm of the blooming season. So the first 8 or 10 sheets are very packed with plants. And then as we go from June into July, the rhythm gets quieter. So there might be a single plant or a trio of plants. And so it's a kind of record of that blooming season. But I should also say she's an artist. So she is thinking about placement and how things relate to each other. And sometimes you do see plants that seem to have formal relationships on the same page. But there doesn't seem to be a consistency about, okay, all these plants were in one spot, would have grown in one spot, because like field plants and swamp plants and forest plants sometimes show up on the same sheet. So it's more about the temporality that puts them together.
Okay. In the catalog, one of the authors who wrote for the catalog, Ava Lyer Burkhart, writes, "The nature studies invite the viewer to reimagine botanical knowledge, pointing perhaps toward a new plant thinking," a term that I'm now totally enamored of, "an alternative ontology of vegetal life. To reimagine botany is to reimagine gender." And so I'm really curious about this statement. I recognize it's not your statement, but it is something that is published in relation to this exhibition. First, could you talk to us a little bit about this idea of plant thinking, and how we might consider Klint's work in that respect? But then also, could we start to think then too about the gender of plants, which I think is a nice segue then to start to think about the diagrams that are also on the pages.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
And I'll just say that Ava's essay, which is really wonderful, is looking at of Klint's portfolio in the context of botanical drawing in a larger way. That she's been working on a project about botanical drawing in the 18th century. And so she was a perfect interlocutor for us and brought so much to our thinking. Is just an amazing writer on drawing. So I highly recommend her work to the crew here. Um, so, um, so the question of plant thinking, I think there's maybe people on the call who, this is that might be interested in like the vegetal humanities and the turn to plant humanities, which is very much a, I think an interesting kind of philosophical turn in contemporary thinking that's cross-disciplinary because it involves science and philosophy and literature, history, art history. And so we couldn't, as we were trying to understand how of Klint, as she puts it, connects the plant world to the world of the soul. We're very much interested in that idea and how, and there's some thinking out there about like, are plants sentient? Do they think? Do they feel? And so we because it was fascinating, we really went down that road. And there's like a set of amazing writers who are working in that field. So I think Ava is kind of alluding to that thinking there. And then as far as gender goes, the other thing that she put on the table is that so often botanical artists historically have been women working with male scientists. And so Ava wanted to raise that, like, what is that about? And how does, as I think she puts it at another point in the essay, how does of Klint in a way perform gender, and what is she trying to get at with these with thinking about with her particular approach to plants. And even she very beautifully describes some of these diagrams, and we should talk about this juxtaposition that of Klint does, which is the kind of the radical act in these drawings to put together something observed and something envisioned, something representational and something abstract. And that Ava sees in a way the diagram is a kind of signature for the artist. It's like a way because because so in so many ways that the botanical artists, again, who are often women, like their kind of sense of the plant is shut out. They're there to be kind of mechanically show it for the scientist who's going to do all of the unpacking. And so this is a way of putting herself into the drawing. Was one thought that Ava had about the diagrams.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that another of the authors in the catalog writes, Lena Struve, is, and this is the botanist that you were referring to, is that, of course, she is acknowledging when plants are male or female, which is something that, people have known about for a very, very long time, like surprisingly longer than you would think we've known about this. But interestingly also that of Klint is willing to acknowledge when they might be bisexual or when they're hermaphroditic. Which is a really interesting thing to think about when we start to think then also about the female sociality of Klint herself. She, of course, was in contact with men, but she had her closest relationships with women. And so this is a really interesting way of thinking about, again, as you were saying, the way that of Klint might have been relating herself as an artist, herself as a botanist, herself as an illustrator, also to the plants.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to say about all of that. And of Klint was, worked closely with a group of like-minded women. From the earliest days of her art making, she participated in automatic drawing sessions, seances, with a group of women. There's first called the Five, and then there's the 13. So there are various groups. And while and she imagined also like sort of building a community of women on this island that she was living in at the time that she made the nature studies. Um, so there's that. And then as far as again, so much learning from Lena, the botanist. I mean, just incredible, like eye-opening, perception-changing experience for me and our team, I think. But one of the things that we learned that's, like for scientists, gardeners, et cetera, out there is that one of the ways, I mean, that there's a system of identifying plants, and that is through its reproductive system. So when you identify a plant, you're counting all of these parts of the reproductive system. The kind of the sexuality of the plant is very much is essential to understanding what the plant is and how it functions. And so of Klint as being extremely knowledgeable about plants. I mean, that was one thing that was, again, like a real, something that we learned in the course of our research and really wanted to foreground in the exhibition, is that she really knows these plants well. And so sometimes in some of the drawings, she'll give us the different parts of the plant, and because she in other works she associates the color yellow with male and blue with female. When we see that used in the drawing, sometimes again the botanist was able to help us connect to the use of those colors with the particular details of the plant's reproductive system. And we don't, and we think that was intended. It's a little bit of speculation on our part, but we see it enough that we think that she's trying to say something about that.
Chloe, can you just show us image 61 really quickly so that I can illustrate for everybody how long we've known about the male and female plants? This is a 15th century example from Italy of male and female mandrakes. And so this unknown illuminator has drawn both of them. And of course, this is important, right? If you have a plant that needs to reproduce, having both sexes of the plant available, at least in somewhere in the location, it won't reproduce if you don't have both. And so this is again a knowledge that humans have had for a very long time, well before Linnaeus actually started developing his systems of understanding plant sexuality and gender. So now we can go back.
And part of our research was really looking into of Klint's natural science education. And so, we did a deep dive, and she had a very strong natural science education, and very, when we looked at the curriculum and know what she studied, and so all of that was just more kind of fuel for us to see that what she was doing was that she knew what she was doing. This wasn't a passing interest. This was real knowledge.
You mentioned that for of Klint, blue was, I hope I'm getting this right, blue was female and yellow was male. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so that kind of helps us then extrapolate out to other ways of how she might have assigned either color or line, or even, for example, ways of thinking about trajectory. Is that pretty constant across her work, or does she tend to change her mind? Can she use the same symbol to mean two different things?
So when when these drawings when these drawings arrived at the museum, and we were kind of, as you can imagine, just amazed by the exquisiteness of these plants and trying to understand how a what is the relationship between plant and diagram, because this is, as I said, this is the radical move. And so sometimes, as in the one on the screen now, you can see that the diagram that's below this plant in the middle called the herb Paris is also this kind of four paneled, it's like this four paneled pinwheel shape, which seems to echo the four leaves of the herb Paris plant. And so sometimes there seems to be like a formal relationship in how she determines what the diagram is going. Why does the diagram take the form it does? And sometimes it seems to say something about how the plant reproduces or how it grows. And also in this sheet that we're showing now, the plant on the left side, which is the field horsetail, is a plant that reproduces by the wind. It sends out spores that scatter around, and that's how it reproduces. It isn't pollinated by a bee or something like that. And so the little diagram, it's hard to see on the screen, but it looks like an hourglass, and it has little spore-like shapes in there that are moving from one chamber to the next. And so again, with the help of the botanist, we speculate that diagram might be saying to us something about telling us something about the plant. And if you go to the one that we were just had on the screen before, Chloe, the field bindweed. I think I asked for that before, but it was, anyway, it's okay. We'll find it again. But anyway, there are lots of examples. And so through this process of close looking, we kept, I will say that, like, I had this idea that I was going to crack the code. Like, I was going to know, like, all the squares within squares mean X, all the spirals mean Y, all the zigzags means Z. And with great humility, which is a word that Klint uses a lot to describe the kind of the discovery she makes in these plants, I learned that there were many ways that there isn't one system that we've discovered yet. And I should say, like, one of the joys of having this portfolio on view at MoMA is just to get the feedback, and I like learn from all of you. Hopefully we'll go see the exhibition, and because I think there is still a lot to be learned from these works. And so more to come, but not a system. But one thing, because I'm not sure we said this already, is that one of the, like, a key discovery for us was realizing that the portfolio of drawings were directly related to a set of notebooks, and those notebooks follow step by step the what we've described already as the rhythm of these drawings. So beginning in April with the Hepatica, with the and so the related notebook has has the scientific name of the plant, the common name of the plant, the date of observation, in this case, the image of the diagram, but then it has an additional treat, because it also shares with us what Klint has discovered in the plant, which is a state of human consciousness, human character, and I'm just finding in the book. So in the case, the central flower here is the lily of the valley, that with the big leaf, and Klint connects this to innocence, silence, and strength. So the idea is that she's looking very, very closely at these plants. She's as she draws them, she's looking closely, and she's discovering this something about the human condition in them. And then that those ideas are visualized in the diagrams. And she gives a name to these diagrams. She uses this word rectilinear, which is Swedish for guidelines or directions forward. So that's a little bit of a clue to these ideas being a kind of lessons. And she's very clear in the writings that relate to in these notebooks that relate to the drawings. She says, when you gaze upon the plant kingdom, you can discover aspects of the human condition. So she's very clear about her, of the method here.
So Lena Struve, again, the botanist who wrote for the catalog, wrote, "Af Klint's practice reflected the synergy she found among her spiritual beliefs, the scientific progress that was evident all around her, and her training and experience as an amateur botanist." We've spoken kind of elusively about her spiritual beliefs, but could you just speak just briefly about what those were, and then we'll move more into the abstraction for the end of the conversation.
Well, I think that the project is a kind of, she says that she's trying to connect the plant world to the world of the soul. So she's seeing this possibility of this interconnectedness, really of the entire natural world, of the entire ecosystem, and that human feeling is very much a part of that. And so the portfolio is an attempt to show that, and to show that these kind of we can call them spiritual discoveries, we can call them aspects of human character, we can call them moral conditions. They kind of vary in their in the kind of sensibility of the feeling that she discovers in them. But what I think is most important is that interconnectedness, the fact that that something material is connected to something spiritual, visionary, that you can't have one without the other, I think is a crucial message of the drawings.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting way of putting it, that you can't have one without the other, because of course she cannot illustrate them the same way. They are two different, I'm going to say levels, and I don't mean that one is higher or better than the other. I just mean that they are two different ways of representing that operate on us as viewers differently. And so this then leads us really beautifully, thank you, Jodi, to talk about the abstraction, the diagrams in these images. You wrote in the catalog, side by side across the sheet, the two modes, pictorial illusionism and a distilled flatness, demand comparison. Which is better, most accurate, most evocative, most descriptive, most insightful, form or representation? Can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that what's so amazing about these drawings, and I've spent a lot of time with them, and I've spent a lot of time in the galleries. And I have to tell you, I cannot get enough of them. I mean, they're just so amazing. Never get tired of it. Is that tension? Like, I don't think, I was asking the question, but I don't think there's an answer, right? Yeah. I think that's what the wonder of it is, like, how can these two things exist on this field? They're, as the one we're looking at, which is one of the most, like, amazing, right? It's a linden tree, and somehow this kind of chain of almost like beads echoes somehow the way the leaves and flowers of the tree kind of seem to fall from above. So there's something there, but then there's the primary colors and the chain and the softness of the leaves, and she's trying to put those things together, which is, I think, equivalent to putting together the plant world and the world of the soul. And so all these distinctions, but she sees an interconnectedness. And so I guess in the end, I don't know if it answers your question, but um, it's still, even as I find it shocking, I'm always looking for how they connect.
Mm-hmm. I think that's inevitable, right? And of course, that's why then we want there to be the key that unlocks them. Even as good modernists, we need to be okay with the idea that they might not signify what she claims that they're signifying. It's a very tricky bind that she's putting us into.
Well, and I think one question, and this isn't to the abstraction question, but I like looking at these, I think one of the things we wonder, and we don't really have an answer, is she saying that anyone who takes the time, because I think it is a kind of, I don't think I write about this, but I think it's meant to show us how to look this what this imagined book, right? It's about close looking and about what you can discover from close looking. But I wondered, so this is a question still out there for me, is she saying that anyone who looks closely is going to visualize those ideas that we're seeing on the screen now and those images? Or is this something that is personal to her and that each of us can find our own thing? Or is it that she can see something, she has because she's trained her eye and worked at it and knows the plant. So I think that's a question too, like about universality, even though she's playing with things like spirals and concentric circles and things that we know, X's, is the experience universal, or do we, each of us has the possibility of going outside and looking at something growing and like learning something about ourselves.
I'm going to come back to that question of going outside for my last question. But I would be remiss and Fong would be disappointed if I didn't bring Meyer Shapiro into this. So I'm going to bring Meyer Shapiro into this. Because of course, we also need to acknowledge that there is the written word on these sheets as well. And so we're talking actually about 3 orders of representation: the written word, the pictorial representation, and then the diagrammatic or the abstract. Shapiro actually writes really beautifully about these things. And he writes, when introduced into a picture, the written word may lead to anomalies of space composition, a challenge to the modern reader's perception of the painting as a consistently ordered artistic whole. The written word does not have for the eye the same relation to space as pictorial signs. And so perhaps what she's doing is not causing us to solve these things, but actually to kind of revel in the complexity of these things, that if we are practicing close looking at her pages, we do then have to engage in 3 different orders of symbolism, of signing. And so therefore we really do have to engage with her work in a way that perhaps even with the largest of her canvases, we don't necessarily.
Yeah, so it's like a brain teaser.
It totally is.
It's all of these connections, but it's so fascinating to think about it that way, because there is this there's the convention of plant naming that's a botanical convention. So we're getting here in the one on the right is the scientific name for the marigold. In this case, she doesn't give us the common name. So Calendula officinalis, and so that's a name. But she also has this word rectilinear, which is right below the diagram, and so she feels compelled to name this thing that she's invented, right? It has no name. It's not a thing out there. It's her own thing, but she has to give it a name. And so you have in this very simple one, because it's good to look at that and not get to the complicated one on the left side, but just think of those. Those are, they're both kinds of naming, but very different valences. Like one is like the language of science, but she's inventing this name, but she's using, I should say, that word also is a navigational term, and just so fascinating. She comes from a family of naval cartographers, map makers. So that's another fascinating topic, like this person who's interested in signs and a family of a kind of sign makers. Um, so yeah, I think it is this kind of this complex bringing together of different ways of knowing that makes these drawings so fascinating.
I feel like the way you answered that, it would just delight and perplex Heidegger, for example, and concept of the Holzwege, right? Like these are both paths through the woods, but also thorny paths through the woods, which cause us to pull ourselves up short and perhaps to start to look around for another way through.
And
Thank
then
you.
also like the plain, like the field, which I think
Yes,
I think Shapiro brings up, because you get this,
yes,
the that marigold is just like layers and layers and layers of these petals. It's like a thick pillow of orange, and then you get this kind of the flatness of of the words.
yes.
And then the diagram itself has its own dimensionality, and she's interested in different dimension. So I don't think, sometimes she adds arrows to the diagrams, and so that they're supposed to spin and turn. So I think she is thinking about them dimensionally. So that,
Mhm.
but it's flat paper. All of those conundrums that the drawing is so kind of perfectly poised to play out.
Yes. What Jodi's referring to in a different part of the same essay, Shapiro writes, as a written work, the book is a field of non-mimetic visual signs called conventional or arbitrary by students of language that elicit in the reader a prescribed mode of perception. And so of Klint, such an interesting way is both relying on those conventions while dealing in a very arbitrary way of then using them for herself. They're so rich. So then for my last question, Jodi, I want to ask you, not many people may realize that MoMA has also planted a garden in relation to this exhibition. And so if you're in New York and you're able to go to the exhibition, as you know, MoMA has a garden. And so a lot of the plants that are growing in the garden this season are plants that are related to the Hilma of Klint exhibition. And so I wanted to ask you about that first, how you're hoping that they inform our viewing of the exhibition, but then also, can you talk to us about working with things that grew and changed over the course of this installation?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you bring up that last bit, because we were working with our gardeners who are great, and we gave them a big list of plants. So there are 111 plant species depicted in the portfolio, 114 species total, and so we gave them this huge list. We're like, can you get Swedish plants? And we want to have this, we wanted to have a presence in the garden and extend the experience. And we kept asking them, can you, like, what is it going to look like? What are you going, what is the garden going to look like? And they kept saying to us, we can only plan so much. We don't know what's going to thrive, what's going to last, when we kept pushing them. And then we finally realized, yes, like this is kind of an organic, ever-changing thing. And it's because these are common wildflowers or weeds. They just grow. Like it's not a garden, kind of a formal garden. So that was a kind of learning, definitely for me. And you're so great to do that with our gardeners. And I think, we're lucky to have this space in Midtown, very unusual, where you can get a bit of a respite from the city and just pause for a moment. And but I think so. It's just always a great opportunity to be able to do something in the garden. But I think for the exhibition, we you know I think maybe I've already said this a little bit, that that the exhibition is so much about close looking, both off Klint's looking and then encouraging our visitors to look closely. And so those of you who've been in the exhibition know we provided magnifying glasses, and the works are installed on these angled walls, all the better to be able to lean in and really look. Like, it's so much better to look that way, it turns out, especially for these kind of works. So she's looking closely. We had to look closely in understanding the works. Our visitors are looking closely, and but we wanted them to, well, we wanted to maybe have them have the experience that we had, our team, which is that in working on this exhibition, I feel like my vision and perception has completely changed. Like, you can't say that so often. I've worked on a lot of great shows and I always learn something, but this kind of transformation in vision, which is that I go out into the world and I see nature. I look at it, I pay attention, and it's our dream, I think our curatorial dream, my dream, for our visitors, that they will have a kind of transformation of that sort in the gallery. So when they go out, into their own environs, they will also see nature differently. And so the garden gives them a little push to try that on site. Like, you can leave the exhibition and go down there and hopefully maybe recognize some plants and pay closer attention. And so it's very, the garden part of the project is very much part of our dream for our audience.
That is such a wonderful way to send us forth. So I thank you so much, Jodi, and I'm going to turn it back over to Chloe.
Jodi and Amanda, that was such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. We have lots of questions from the audience today. I'm going to try to get to as many of you as possible. Thank you so much for these. The first question is from our editor at large, Anne McCoy. Anne, I'm going to give you the microphone.
Oh, great. Now I can rephrase my question. Even though we're always sort of emphasizing the feminist ladies aspect, Hilma of Klint went 4 times to the Goetheanum in Dornach to study the color theory of Rudolf Steiner's translations of Goethe's color theory. And Goethe was also a major naturalist. And he did a lot of little diagrams relating color to plants. And also Rudolf Steiner was a major, with his major plant person who had all these theories about the energetic possibilities of plants and also related them to color. So with the little Narcissus one, I definitely thought of some of Steiner's and also Goethe's little color wheels and things. And so I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about the Steiner Goethe relationship? I know they had a falling out later, but I think there was a big influence there. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So we didn't go down the path of belief system today because there's so much to talk about, but of Klint was very interested in theosophy and became a devotee of anthroposophy, which is the kind of philosophical belief system founded by Rudolf Steiner and is centered as you mentioned at the Goetheanum in a town right outside of Basel. you can visit there.
Door knock.
And in Dornoch, exactly. And so so she was she was a devotee, and she visits she visits often. And then not only for the color theory, she goes to lectures. She's extremely interested in his thinking. And so that's so that's definitely a related topic here. And one path that you might go down is to do that connection, the Goethe to Steiner to Klint connection. And there's like lots of others who might like sort of be part of that that thread, because Steiner is the editor of Goethe's scientific writings. That's his kind of his his first important work, as a and that's crucial. And so so she's accessing, we think she's probably accessing Goethe directly, but also accessing him through Steiner. And so it's very much part of this thinking. And Steiner's own thinking, Steiner himself uses nature often as a way to kind of express lessons. So all of the interest in nature is also there.
Thank you so much. I felt like that was the elephant in the room.
Thanks. No, perfect. There's, like I said, so much to talk about.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for that answer, Jodi. The next question is from Helene Greenberg-Wyman. Helene is wondering, was Klint aware of Anna Atkins, botanist and photographer who did cyanotype prints and algae illustrations?
So the answer is I don't know. We think, like, as I said, we know that she had a very strong natural science education, and we know the kinds of things she studied, the topics. We know, she would have studied Linnaeus, like all other Swedish children of her generation. But what she knew of kind of other, others, doing botanical related work, we don't know, other than I guess I should say she would have known the Swedish botanical atlases, that kind of botanical work. But it would be intriguing to go down that road, to see what she would have had access, what else she would have had access to.
Thank you for that answer, and thank you for that question, Helene. The next question is from Anna Kunz. Anna says, thank you. I can't wait to see the exhibition. Question is regarding the vertical format of the drawings. Is that a choice of Hilma's or the standard paper size? I'm just thinking the compositions feel ascendant.
Yes, such a good question. And again, another thing we couldn't get to. So it's definitely her choice, and it was, and if you're really interested in the kind of paper and all that, there's a wonderful essay in our catalog by our amazing paper conservator Laura Neufeld, who was an incredible partner on this exhibition. And I always learn so much from her, and looking together with a conservator is just mind blowing. And so we know the kind of paper, and it was a pad, and she would have drawn each one sequentially, etc. But one of the kind of wonderful things about doing exhibitions is that you bring things together, and we have a number of comparative objects in the exhibition, and one of the most amazing things is that we have a set of plant specimens, pressed plants, and we have those in the show because we wanted to. We learned a lot about af Klint's botanical education, and one of a key aspect of Swedish botanical education for students was that in their summers they would have to go out into nature and collect, identify, and press up to about 100 plants. And at the end of the summer, they would hand what are called student herbariums into their teacher. And so we don't have off Klint, sadly. But we like certainly she would have done that work, but we were able to source a set of herbarium sheets made by a contemporary of Klint's who lived in the same area. And this person gave her whole collection to a museum in Oslo, and they were so generous to lend these 100-year-old plant specimens. And these are, when you make a herbarium sheet, you have to kind of compose the plant so it looks like it's growing. So there was, for me, a lot of connection between art and botany, like putting together our disciplines, which was so gratifying. But also each one is identified with the scientific name, the common name, and the date of observation, just like of Klint's drawings. And you'll see when you see the show that the format is it's a longer sheet, because the longer sheet allows you to have room to lay out the plan and also do the identification work that on the labels on the bottom. So you can't help but see, I often talk about this portfolio as a kind of like an atlas of the spirit, or a flora of the spirit, which is a kind of botanical atlas of flowers of a particular region. But it's also a kind of herbarium of the spirit, so I think she was thinking about the herbarium. And so a long answer to why that format seemed like the right one.
Thank you so much for that question, Anna, and for that answer, Jodi. I have a few more questions for you. The next one is going to come from Cynthia. Cynthia asks, have her journals been translated? How do we know her process and her codex, i.e. the philosophical diagrams and knots on the drawings? And is there a noted relationship with the Bach flower naturopathic medicine studies, England, I think?
So, in at MoMA, what we understand how those notebooks worked is that we learned from our conservator that of Klint would have originally written those the descriptions of character, states of human consciousness, etc., on the sheet itself. We know that because the conservator can see what's been erased. Some of it's still there. She can see it in raking light. So we know that information was on the sheet itself. And then she transfers that information, the scientific name, common name, date of observation, and the spiritual idea to a notebook, a Swedish notebook. So for our project, we translated that notebook, and all of the information is in the catalog. So really beautifully designed by amazing designers, with a team led by Lorraine Wild, an incredible designer. And so you can have the experience you have in the exhibition of seeing the plant and the state of consciousness, character, spiritual idea right next door. And so those were newly translated. But I will search for others, because it's great to know about the bibliography out there. There was a second notebook that of Klint makes so she transfers all that information into a second notebook where she adds exacting copies of each of the diagrams. And that was the one that Chloe showed in the slideshow. And that notebook has been presented in, it's not quite a facsimile, but in its full, in each sheet, in a volume edited by Christine Bergen called Hilma Klint Notes and Methods. Highly recommend that book. It's really beautiful. And in that notebook, instead of having all of the material in Swedish, she has it in German. And that goes to of Klint's ambition to reach a wider audience. German, of course, would have been the language of Northern Europe then, and so you can buy that book too. I recommend it, Notes and Methods, and you have the full thing. In addition, sorry, I'm going on. Because we didn't talk about this, for all of the 114 species represented in the portfolio, of Klint wrote 114 essays, longer essays. And those essays describe in detail how the plant grows, where it grows, how it reproduces. Sometimes it's medicinal qualities, how it impacts your stomach. all of that, and connects it to to spiritual ideas. So she's really doing the work there, and you see her deep plant knowledge and how she's working to connect it to the life of the soul. And for those essays, we translated a group of those for our project, and excerpts of those are in the catalog. They're very poetic and beautiful. And there's more, the Hilma Klint Foundation, Klint wrote all the time. And so I think in the coming years, we're going to see more translations of writings by the artist.
Thank you so much for that answer, Jodi. The next question is from Greg. Greg, I'm going to give you the chance to unmute if you'd like to ask directly. Otherwise, I can ask your question myself.
Thanks. I think it's already been answered a little bit, but I was wondering about the possible reference. I mean, with the Steiner and Goethe example from Anne's question, if there were other systems of, plant-based references and literary references, religious symbolic references from, art historical examples, or, their whole symbologies of plants and their meaning. If there are other examples beyond what you've already mentioned that we might look at that F. Klint might have known, that'd be great to hear. Otherwise, it's pretty solid start with Steiner.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, with the help of the botanist who's Swedish born and raised, we understand that some of what she would have known about the plants would have come from like folk knowledge. And so there's definitely that running through it, like Swedish folk knowledge, and like from, she in the summers she lived in the country, and there, as Lena Struve, the botanist, tells us, like lots of picking berries and jams, and like all of this, that where you learn what, in a way, what the human relationship with plants are. So that was clearly impactful. Then, as I said, like her school, what she got from school, which we also dug into. But there's also a tradition, like in France, of in the 1700s, the 1800s, these florilegia, which some people write about, where you get the symbolic meaning of plants, and sometimes they're kind of directories to to how to kind of find a husband or live a moral life, and this kind of thing. So, but we don't know. We guess that she would have had more access to other kinds of flower symbologies, even though we can't document exactly which ones, other than the Swedish atlases. Oh, and she owned in her library and on display in her exhibition are her own field guides. So there was that, and that's more scientific plant knowledge, less about the meaning. But we have those, and those are totally marked up, and indicate when she might have pressed a plant, when she might have seen a plant under, like all these ways of notation that the botanist was very familiar with. So there's that too. But it would be interesting. A lot of people have come through the exhibition and have different experience with the meanings of plants. And I think it would be interesting, like now that we've done this kind of initial unpacking, I think there's lots of ways that we might try to launch other investigations and find other connections.
Thank you for that question, Greg, and for that answer, Jodi. The last question is a great segue from that one, and it's from Tara Eskelin. Jodi, how do the emotive qualities Hilma af Klint associated with the plants she observed overlap with other modalities of observing plant consciousness and/or their subtle, unseen, or energetic qualities, i.e., indigenous ways of knowing, herbalism, florography, etc.?
I would just say all of it, like, again, the total extension to Greg's question, because I think that it would be so amazing to recontextualize these and put them into dialogue with other similar kinds of projects and see what we learn, because I think we would learn a lot. So definitely more to be done. And and the scholarship of Klint is young. I mean, there's this a wonderful biography by Julia Voss on the artist. Some of you might know that came out 2 years ago. And there have been these exhibitions, but in the scheme, there's a lot to be learned, more to do.
Thank you so much for your answers to those questions, Jodi, and thank you everyone so much for your questions. We are going to conclude today's program with a reading. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jodi.
Thanks, Chloe. And before I start, I just want to thank you all so much for joining. It's such a pleasure, and so many good questions, and always wonderful to be with the engaged admirers of the Brooklyn Rail. So thank you. So I'm just going to, I thought it would be fitting to read something, to share some words about Klint from these essays that I just described. And so this is an excerpt from an essay that she wrote about a flower called the erect cinquefoil. That's the English common name for this plant, the Potentilia erecta. My Latin isn't so good. So I'm just going to read what she says about this plant. The nature spirit in this plant gazes upward with joy. I'm just going to start again. The nature spirit in this plant gazes upward with joy, and at the same time tries to soak up what is in the earth, so as to place it in the service of mankind. The little plant makes no showy gestures. It nestles close to the ground, but joy shines through it in every blossom. It has an important message. It is better to spread joy drop by drop than to squander it unduly. It also reminds us that those who are innocent and believe in modest joys are frequently stepped on by careless feet. Yet the plant is indestructible. Anyone who can maintain his equilibrium will forever spread joy.
Thank you, Jodi. That was such a beautiful way to conclude today's program. Thank you so much to you and to Amanda for your conversation today, which was an absolute pleasure. Thank you to Jack and Colleen and Chloe at the Museum of Modern Art for their support in preparing for today's event and providing all those beautiful images for the conversation. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art and Tiger Foundation for sponsoring the New Social Environment programs and making conversations like this one possible. They also support our archive, where this will be shortly on the Rail's YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, our staff, and our operations. You can support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free tomorrow at 1 p.m. we will be having a conversation with Alice Aycock, Jane Dixon, Loretta Howard, and William Corwin on This Spot NYC, a feminist art history nonprofit. And as is Rail tradition, you can now all turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And,
That was
Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Wonderful show.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.